Welcome to Life Picks Relationships, helping you understand and enliven your marriage through the various perspectives and experiences of others who found a way to prioritize what's really important in life. From new love to those that have weathered the storms, let's get ready to take your relationships to the next level with your host, ST.
Hey, Life Fixers, hope you're having an awesome day. Are you ready to better understand yourself, your partner, and your marriage? Today, we're going to go in depth on that, as this episode, as you know, because you read the title, is all about curiosity. And I am really curious to see where this episode is going to take us, because I'm a really curious human being. But to really go and understand yourself, your partner, and your marriage, you have to be curious. So we're going to get deep into it. I mean, if like you're not curious, you're not really going to go and try to understand your partner and your marriage. So I'm pretty sure that all Life Pixers are curious also, because, or else you won't really want to understand yourself better, or your partner, or your marriage. Now, for today, joining us, we have an author, podcast host, dating and relationship coach, Tedx speaker, and founder of Last First Date and the Woman of Value. Thank you so much, Sandy Weiner, for being here. I am super excited to be speaking with you. Guys, if you want to find out more about her, go to lastfirstdate.com. Her private Facebook group is Your Last First Date. I'm going to put all her links in the show notes, all her socials, where you can contact her, her website, her podcast, all that will be there. You'll want to go check it out, because there's some really good stuff there. Now, Sandy, for our very first question, I'm curious to know, why did you compare yourself in your TED Talk to Tootsie Pop? I know you said that because it's soft on the inside and hard on the outside, but I could think of like plenty of other things that are soft on the inside and hard on the outside. Why specifically was it a Tootsie Pop?
Good question. So first of all, people can find it on my website, lastfirstdate.com. If you go to the About section, you can find it there. Why a Tootsie Pop? Well, the whole story of the TED Talk is kind of interesting. And can I tell a little bit about how I got the TED Talk? And
say whatever you want to say.
Okay.
Free range here.
I had just started my coaching practice a couple of years before, and I had just started the dating coaching and relationship coaching. And I was watching a lot of TED Talks, and I was walking every day pretty much with this friend of mine who was going through a really bad divorce. And I happened to mention the Brené Brown TED Talk on vulnerability. And I said, oh, this is like an amazing TED Talk. And she said, what's a TED Talk? And I said, you don't know what a TED Talk is. So she went out and started watching TED Talks, and TED Talks were now front and center in her brain. And suddenly, I think like the next day, a friend of hers posts on Facebook, I'm organizing a Tedx Conference. I'm looking for people who are passionate about something. And she goes, oh, my friend Sandy, she's a really passionate person. She's passionate about a lot of things. And I had zero public speaking experience. I was petrified to get on stage, but I had a strong passion for the work I was doing. And so I just said yes to the opportunity. I couldn't think of a theme of what I was going to talk about. And then I remembered something that one of my dates had said. He was kind of this tough guy who was like a teddy bear, inside. And he said, I come across as really tough, but I'm like a Tootsie Pop. I'm tough on the outside and soft on the inside. And I thought, that's really interesting, because as women, we often come across as tough on the outside and weak and soft on the inside, which is the opposite of what we need to be. But we look for that in a man. We like that tough macho exterior. But when we show up that way as women, we are so repulsive to men. And I had no idea that I had lived most of my life that way. And I thought, this is a great theme. And it turned out, not only was this TED Talk like an incredible opportunity, but it sort of propelled me into a speaking career before I was ready. And I'm a big believer in leaping before you look and just doing things. And this TED Talk has really been a theme of my coaching practice. I help women access their inner core and get stronger inside and know who they are and know what their value is, so that they can be women of value, which is one of my terms. And then they can soften on the outside, because often we think, oh, we should just be ourselves and just take the guards down. But it is extremely scary to take the guards down before you get those inner skills of what are your boundaries? What are you protecting internally? And what can you open up to?
Yeah. Okay. So it wasn't you that came up with the name, but they.
Well, I came up with the idea for women.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, you brought it into something. It wasn't just like a criticism that someone gave you and you're like, okay, I'm mad at this guy. Rather, you made something really beautiful out of that. So
thank you. Yeah, you never know where your inspiration is going to come from, right?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, now as we talk about curiosity, the power of curiosity and how it affects marriage, I think it's first really important to like define what curiosity is. It's a word that we use really often, and it's a simple word, but just so like everyone's on the same page, how would you define curiosity?
I would say for me in this context, it's the opposite of judgment. It's being open. It's not assuming you know what the other person is thinking or wanting, but getting curious means that you're asking questions and you're kind of coming in with this beginner's mind of, I don't know. And so I need to ask you, because if I make up a story, it's probably going to be wrong, possibly going to be wrong. It's also going to be a lot of projection, fiction rather than fact. So curiosity to me is this open space where we really get to know each other.
Yeah. Like I have a friend who she always says like, my rule number one is don't assume. Like anytime you say anything, she's like, you're assuming, don't assume, I'm not assuming. And I think that it's really true. It's a really good, like non-judgment is a good way to put it, the opposite of curiosity. Now, why do you think it's so important to be curious? Now, I'm a really curious person. There's a reason why I love doing this podcast, because I get to ask people whatever questions I want, even though I ask them in everyday life anyways. And I just like, we'll ask them really personal questions. Obviously, they don't have to if they don't want to answer, but I'm just so curious. I always was as a kid, and I find it such a good trait. But why is it important?
It's important because, first of all, even if we are curious people, and I too have always been super curious, I didn't realize how I also was making assumptions. And so we bring our past, our history, our triggers, we bring a lot of other stuff to the table that we don't even realize is influencing the conversations we're having with people. So if we're on a date, for example, or if we're talking to our significant other and we come with our history, we're seeing the world only through our lens. And we just make an assumption that everybody sees the world that way. But if we see the other person as like they're from another planet, where we know nothing about that planet, then we can be really curious. What do they eat there in that planet where you live? What do the houses look like? And just to really come in with like, I don't know, I'm going to get curious. And, you always hear people say, why did they do that? How could somebody do that? I would never do that. Well, you're not them. And so if you come in asking questions, you'll find out what their meaning was behind it instead of making it up.
Yeah. I think it also makes it much easier to not like just jump to conclusions, because you're not like saying, okay, don't come to conclusions, don't assume, don't judge, don't do what that part, like criticize the other person. Instead, you're saying like, this is a game. This is fun. Like, what do the houses look like there, right? What do people eat on that planet? And it makes it so much easier, so much more enjoyable to really go and find out more about the other person. Now, I find that curiosity, some people are just so curious. I mean, like kids are really, really curious. And then adults, a lot of times who just don't have patience for them, or sometimes just like lack of time and things are going and you have to get the kids out to school and everything going on, that like they end up like crushing the curiosity, which I find really hard to see. It makes me really sad. But as adults, some people are really curious and they have that attribute of being able to ask and not just judging. And then there are those people that find it much harder. So if someone wants to become more curious, what could they go and do?
Well, I think that one of the reasons that a lot of adults shut down to curiosity is pain, wounds from childhood. Maybe they were shut down, and maybe that's their armor. That's their Tootsie Pop, right? It's what we develop in order to protect our hearts and protect us from getting hurt. But we also protect ourselves from vulnerability, from really getting to know people on a deeper level. So if you want to really develop that muscle of curiosity, I would say first notice. That the first step in anything is awareness. So if you're aware that you jump to conclusions, you make assumptions, you're not really spending time getting to know people, you're impatient, a lot of the things that you mentioned, Esty, then I would say just notice what's happening in your body when you feel that way. So maybe you start to get into judgment, and you find yourself tightening up. Maybe your breathing gets shallower, or maybe your fists start to clench or something like that happens. So start to notice what happens in your body, even if you can't name the emotion and name what's happening, because your body knows first. Your body doesn't lie. And I think that once you have that, then you can breathe and relax and say to yourself, oh, I am judging. Just even saying I am making an assumption. So that interrupts the pattern, and that can help you then ask a question instead. Because I think that a lot of times we do get hits in our intuition that could be true, based on what we really do know in our deep inner wisdom. But again, we need to check things out. So if we get a sense that somebody's off, or somebody says something and it really starts to get us upset, we can say, hey, I'm feeling upset right now. The story I'm making up is blank, so I'm making up this story that you said that because you're mad at me. I want to know what's really true for you. So taking responsibility also just for the story you're making up in your head is really, really important way to get the other person not to be defensive, and then they can be open with you. And really that's the key. We want both of us to be open so we can have open conversations instead of it's my way or your way, and that's it. We can't have back and forth.
Yeah, curiosity is a really good way, and probably one of the starting points of making that safe space for people to go and open up and be vulnerable with you. So you want to be really curious about them. Now, there gets to a point where it's like, okay, am I pushing boundaries? Am I meant to be doing this? Like, how do you know how much? Like, I'm the type that I push, but I always say, okay, if you don't want to say, then don't say. Now, not always can you say that. Not always is the situation, right? And yes, sometimes I do push a bit much. And then the person's like, oh, I don't want to say, which because I give off that environment, I give off that vibe that it's fine. If you don't say, then people are usually fine with it. But it doesn't always happen with people. I had people that ask me some really personal questions right away. And I was like, okay, I like it that you're curious, but there's boundaries here. So how do we know when we should be curious and when it's okay, now it sounds a little bit like a stupid question, but I really found so many adults, they're so curious that they just want to know, that they just cross that boundary of where to go and stop that.
That's a really good question, because there is a point where it's no longer curiosity, it's being nosy. I love what you said, though, because I think if we just check in with each other, we give each other permission to share or not to share. If we're just pushy, then it becomes pushy. It's no longer a safe space. And so I think that check-in is one of the most important things in conversation and relationships. I'll give you an example of unsolicited advice is a perfect place where somebody's trying to contribute to you and they don't check in. They just assume that you need their advice. If they just said, can I share something? Or ask a question first. So are you looking for support? That's a good question. Actually, no, I'm good. I'm totally good. Well, let me give it to you anyway. Let me just tell you what to do. So a lot of people will just push. And so that's where boundaries get crossed. They get crossed when people don't check in, when they push things on you, and they don't respect when you say, no, I'm not comfortable talking about that. Like this happens in dating a lot, where somebody will overshare. They will tell you more than you want to know about their life before you're ready to hear it. It's too much. And even though I'm a curious person, when I first started dating after my divorce, I've had people telling me way too much stuff, and I didn't know how to set a boundary. And so I would just be like, almost like, those ambulance chasers where you don't want to look, but you can't help looking. It was like that. It was like I couldn't hang up the phone, but I wanted to. And my son would come up to me and go, Mom, you're not obeying your own rules. Like you really have to hang up. But now I have no problem doing it. Like I had a guy recently call me and tell me within the first 5 minutes that he was not divorced yet, on his second marriage, that it was a contentious divorce, that his wife wanted all of his money, and then he had prostate cancer, but he's okay now. And he wouldn't stop talking. I hadn't even said a word. And he's like, what else should I tell you about me? And I'm like, way too much already.
Right. Like I heard more than enough. I'm done with you.
I was very polite and kind. And I said, I just want to let you know that I am not going to go out with you. I'm sure you're a nice man, but I don't date men who are not divorced. And I wish you well. Now, if I said too much, I would have said, and you know what? You share too much and you shouldn't tell people your life story. You should keep the negativity out. That's not my job. Not my job to school people who didn't ask for it, because that's unsolicited advice.
Exactly. I think that sometimes men, not to like categorize anyone, but just a lot of times happens, they want to go and they want to fix the problem. And when their wives go and tell them that go on and just go and complain and just vent, then they go and say like, okay, here's the problem. Go into it, right? Like men are from Mars, women are from Venus style type of thing. And here, even though it's like not curiosity, but it's that same type of thing of unsolicited advice, of asking them before, like, okay, so do you want me to just listen to you? Or do you want advice? Now, if you want me to just listen to you, now that could also be a really good sign. Like maybe you just want to talk about it and you just want me to ask you more questions and get even more curious, not to help you, like give you a solution, but just to give you the space to help you go and talk about it and talk through it.
Yeah. So I believe that we need to advocate for ourselves. We will not always find a partner who's going to say, how would you like me to hear what you have to say? I think it's on us to say, I want to share something with you. And right now I just need to vent. Do you have a few minutes to listen? And I would say do that with friends too. Like if you're not looking for advice, set it up. And if you are, you can say something like, I need to get something off my chest. At the end, I'm going to ask you a question and I'm going to look for your advice. So I know, like when I talk to my son, he likes it when I get to the end first, because he has to know how to track me. Like, because I could go off in 20 directions and he's like, where are we going with this? So he's like, what's the key point? And then you can get into the weeds. But tell me at first, like, what do you want from me? So I know what to listen to. Women can say things like, hey, you know what? I went to Bloomingdale's today and I bought a yellow dress. And on the way, I saw my friend Mary and she told me about her breakup. And the guy's sitting there going, is this about the dress? Is this about Mary? Is this about a breakup? I don't know. Do you want me to comment on something? Am I supposed to fix this? I don't know what to do. So we have to be really clear. I'm just unloading my day, and I'd love to hear about your day too.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. You want to take responsibility for you, but at the same time, not that you want to rely that your partner is going to do that, but if your partner is talking to you, you could be the one to go and ask them. If they didn't say that, you could be the one to like initiate it. And then hopefully after some time they see like, hey, they want to know, and they'll be the one to take responsibility and go and tell you if they want advice or they want to hear about it. You could start and get it rolling.
Yeah. And I think the more we do that with each other, the more we train each other to speak to each other in a way that works.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. Now, how has curiosity played a role in your own life?
As I was saying in the beginning, I didn't realize how judgmental I was about a lot of things. Having grown up Orthodox, Jewish, a lot of the training in religion is to judge. We judge ourselves, we judge others, we separate ourselves from others, and that's the nature of religion. And so subconsciously, I think because of my upbringing, there was a lot of right or wrong thinking, even though I thought I was an open-minded person. And when I started studying coaching, so this was in 2006, 2007, I thought I had a lot of good skills with how I worked with people, and I was open-minded, but I didn't realize how close-minded I was about a lot of other things. And so it was a combination of the training that I got in coaching, but also dating again. Dating really helped me to see that I was quickly judging people without knowing them. And I didn't want to be judged. So I needed to do whatever I needed to do with them, what I wanted back for me. How you want to be treated, you should treat other people. And so I realized we judge so much in the dating process. So quickly we go and we make these quick judgments about people without knowing them, both for the good and bad. I mean, we can judge somebody as being an amazingly good person, and they're not a good quality, good characteristics. They don't have the traits you want or need, but you make this quick judgment based on their job or their looks or what they tell you, but not how you feel. And so a lot of what I learned was trust the feelings, trust what the body says, and be open and curious about everything. I think also as a coach, I work with such a diverse population that I've learned to get really curious about what it is to grow up being an African American or Asian or anything that I didn't have an experience with while I was growing up. And so I don't make assumptions. Even if they'll say to me, well, this is my experience as an African American woman, I was treated poorly. I don't feel attractive or whatever it is. And I look at them and I think they're beautiful. It doesn't matter what I think. It matters what they feel. And so getting curious, what makes you feel that way? Who told you this? Where are these stories coming from? And, coaching is a lot of powerful questions. That's really what makes it up. So it is a whole bunch of curiosity and not coming in thinking I know the answers, because only the person who I'm coaching is going to know the answers for themselves.
Yeah. Well, I'm hearing a little bit underneath of what you're saying is really trying, besides for getting into the feelings, is really trying to understand where those assumptions are coming from. Meaning, why are you having these assumptions, right? Like you said, it could be religious. It could be because of the way you grew up, and it could be because of the way that you're thinking. But what can you go and do? Once you could know that, going back to the awareness part, then you could go and get rid of it.
Right. So I work a lot with triggers, and triggers are based in the same place as those assumptions. They're based in our history, how we grew up, what the stories were told, stories in our house, stories that we made up around how we saw the world. And what happens is we experience something similar, and then we immediately go to that assumption or that trigger of, let's say, it's really important to be valued. And when I feel that somebody's taking advantage or not respectful, that is a huge trigger for me. So what's a trigger for you?
What's a trigger for me? Ooh, I have a lot of triggers. One of them is where I don't like being touched. So I get triggered really fast when somebody touches me.
Okay. And can you think of the first time you had that trigger?
Okay. So for me, this is a really not fear one, because I probably should give you a different example, because I worked already a lot on it and been around after why it's triggered, what it goes. And okay. I know that it came from a place of being triggered of people touch. You think about how people touch, and when people touch, a lot of times it's for not the person that they're touching, but they're there for their own personal reasons why they're touching. And as a young age, I associated that with being selfish, you're not caring about me and you are just going and touching yourself. So yeah, that would be a trigger. But we could do a different example or continue taking it further if you rather.
No, what would you like to share as an example?
Yeah, we could go with this. I'm fine.
Okay.
I'm gonna just like warning everyone who's listening, like wondering why these answers are just rolling out. And for you, it might take a little longer just to stop and think. Then
Yeah.
you know why.
Right. So a lot of times people aren't even aware that they have triggers, and you see people have these crazy, not crazy, but like overreacting to something that you think is nothing. And so for a lot of people, like touch might be, you're forced to kiss Uncle Joe every time you see him, or people smother you as a child. And there's a lot of boundaries with touch that get violated, especially with children, where it's like, go kiss him, or people pinch your cheeks, and there's so much, so much here. So I'm curious what it was for you, if you want to share one example of touch that was not good for you.
Yes. So like I said, it was more the concept that I felt as a kid, that, right, like you said, people just come over and pinch me. Now, they're not pinching me because I'm enjoying the pinching, or they're not even like coming and giving me a hug because I want the hug. They're giving me the pitch because they're like it gives, but not even realizing, like it's not a conscious thought, but people just go and do it a lot of times. Or obviously part of it was my own assumption as a kid and like the way I view the world, but they were doing it for themselves. Like they weren't doing it because like I was crying and I felt like I wanted a hug. Like who said I wanted a hug just because I was crying? They did it because, which like, by the way, Brene Brown speaks about it, right? How she says that a lot of times that's what we do to comfort our own selves because we see somebody else crying or whatever, like feeling vulnerable or something going on.
Yeah. So that makes perfect sense, where it's really for them and not you. And again, it's an assumption that you're going to enjoy this because I am, or I think you need this, so I'm going to give it to you. It's like giving somebody a gift that you enjoy, but they're like, why did you give me that? That's like, I had this with my husband gave me for one of my first birthdays after we were married. He bought a Carvel ice cream cake made with mint chocolate chip ice cream, which was his favorite flavor.
Of course.
So I'm like, thank you so much for being so thoughtful and getting me an ice cream cake. Next time, would you be willing to get my favorite flavor on my birthday? And he just would shut down anytime I would make any requests because he couldn't handle it. And so, yeah, so you said you've done some work on touch. So now if somebody touches you or you get triggered, like what happens in your body?
Okay, so it's a very physical thing, as in like my trigger response was extremely physical, like very tense and stuff. So which does happen sometimes, but now I don't jump to that conclusion of making that assumption, because right, there was an assumption both ways. There's an assumption from them that she's gonna like this, and there's assumption from me that they're doing it for themselves, right? So I had to like go and separate that no, maybe it's not, and maybe they are doing it just because they want to be kind, but also being able to learn to go and really, really set those boundaries of like, don't touch me, which everybody knew from like when I was little, you don't touch me because you just don't touch me. I'm going to like shriek at you if you touch me, but now being able to go and do that in like a healthy way. But I think it also really helped me now, and I see other people, like I'll never just give, like, especially a kid, right? Like adults a little bit more in social settings, there are certain places that but like especially kids or anyone, I'll always ask them before, like, do you want a hug or something? And sometimes they say yeah, and sometimes they say no, but it's like that way I know that they know that I'm not just going and violating their being.
Yeah, so that's great. So just to kind of reflect, it sounds like you saw that you had a strong reaction to being touched that didn't always make logical sense as an adult. It was based on a feeling that you had as a child and that you wanted to work through it. And so you sought help and support. And you also realized that you were making assumptions as much as you thought people were making assumptions about you, which is important because I think we often don't see that, or we just assume that people have bad intent when they're doing something when they haven't checked in with us. So it's kind of like the unsolicited advice example, where somebody's just throwing something at you and doing something to you without checking, even sharing a story. All of these things there's a respect piece where we check in with each other and say, is now a good time? I have, as a mom, there are times when I can see a problem in my child, but they're not open to hearing how to work it through yet. And so what I've learned to do, instead of getting really frustrated, because it's so hard to watch a child suffer when you know that they can do certain things to alleviate the suffering, but it's not going to work unless they're ready. And so what I'll say is, it's hard for me to watch you, and it hurts my heart to watch you suffer. I have some great tools to help you. When you're ready, come and see me. Not do this.
Right.
Because that will not work. So it's like, I have resources. I can share them with you, but I won't push them on you. And I think, just being respectful, letting a person know you're available, checking in. So that checking in is it's a huge part of this whole picture too. It's like, don't make assumptions, get curious, check in with the other person. It's stop making up stories. I mean, they're all connected.
Right. Yeah. And I think that part of you telling your son that, like, I have these tools for you when you're ready goes so much so in a marriage, because especially you don't want to have like a father-daughter or mother-son like relationship where you're equal here and you're there to go and support your partner, and you're not here to go and tell them what to do, because they're not going to listen anyways. And if they like feel forced to do something, it's just going to be like nothing good come out of that. So again, like you could tell them like, hey, I have like an idea, maybe when you want to hear it, if you want to hear it, we could go and talk about it and discuss what you could go and handle it. Yeah.
I mean, when you become much more self-aware, it's very easy to look at other people and again, judge them. I remember, that's the opposite end of the spectrum, is that a lot of people who get this new knowledge and they're so excited and they want to impose it on everybody. And then you start judging everyone else as being less than and closed. So you got to be careful either direction, whether you're uninformed or you are informed and you're just beginning to get excited about all the new knowledge. Again, I went out with a guy years ago who was new at all this. And he, first of all, wouldn't stop talking about all the stuff that he had learned. So he was so excited about it to share it with me, which was kind of boring, honestly, because I didn't ask for it and I had been doing it for years. And he was telling me that he just doesn't connect with a lot of people now. And so to me, that's also saying, like, I don't feel I can find our connection anymore because I'm above you. So we have to be careful how we come across and how much our ego is getting in the way of that childlike curiosity, because it really is about being connected to that inner child.
Yeah.
Why'd you do that? What are we going to do next? And that's why it's one of the things I really recommend for anybody, especially as you get older. And if you're in a relationship and you want to inject some fun, is to really go on adventures and go places and do things where you can be a child again and push yourself out of your comfort zone and get really curious about the world. Take a trip to someplace you've never been or surprise each other. That's also that curiosity piece and the adventure of life. We get into these ruts where we do the same thing over and over and over. So I just think the more we can access that inner child, the better.
For sure. It makes life so much more fun. I know, like, every time I do something, like people, my siblings make so much fun of me for being like that inner child. They're like, you're just letting your inner child run your life and nothing. I'm like, I'm just having fun doing the things I have to be doing anyway. So, right? Like, I might as well be curious about it. I might as well be adventurous, and makes life so much more interesting. Okay. So before I get to our final question that I ask everyone, what is the biggest thing you want Life Pixers to take away from this episode?
Don't assume anything. Really try to see the world through somebody else's eyes by asking them questions, not by trying to be them and trying to figure it out. I think we often want to look smart. And one of the best things you can say is, I don't know. Tell me.
Yeah, there's like so many times, like I remember, especially like when I'm doing in this work and like I'm dealing with people that are so much older than me and have so much more knowledge, and I'm really curious. And then like there are like those times that sometimes I'm like, maybe if I say I don't know, they ask me like, have you heard of this? And I say yeah, and I say no, then they're gonna be like, oh my god, this person is like doesn't know anything. Well, I've learned every single time to say, no, I haven't heard about that. And they'll go and like direct me in the right way where I could go and find information about it. And I really, really learned so much. It's actually my favorite part of curiosity. You get to learn about the world. You get to learn about yourself. Like, right. You could be curious about yourself. Also, why you're doing this. Curious to learn about your partner, your friends, just everything, even just like science. There's so much to learn. You don't have any of that if you're not curious.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, so how do you describe an extraordinary relationship without using love, connection, and I want to stick in here curiosity?
An extraordinary relationship. What were the words? I can't use love, connection?
Yeah, love, connection, and curiosity. Yeah.
An extraordinary relationship would be two people who, number one, put the unit of the two of them above all. It's a separate entity. So it's who you become together, always staying open, always nurturing, and not taking each other for granted, asking lots of questions, having fun.
Oh, yeah.
And I respect for sure. I think respecting each other's needs and having your own lives that are separate from each other. So it's who you become when you're together, but also really having just fulfilled lives apart helps you to stay interesting and interested in each other.
I love that so much. Well, thank you so much, Sandy. This was amazing. I really enjoyed talking with you. And I hope, guys, you stop making assumptions now after this.
Thank you.
That's all for this episode of Life Picks Relationships, and we have a huge favor to ask of you that will not only support this show, but also give others what they need to take their marriage to the next level. We're striving to have 1 million downloads per episode by December 31st, 2025, so please share it with your family and friends so they can turn their relationship into an extraordinary one.